I'm going to share what I believe is the real price of the US strike in Nigeria on Christmas Day, right? And before anything else, I really just want to establish with you guys that I'm mixed Nigerian, Grenadian and Irish heritage, raised in the UK. So I just want to be clear that I'm speaking on this not because it's a hot topic, but because Nigeria is part of my bloodline and I care deeply about her future, right? So for everyone watching, this is a long video with various elements that all add up to a big picture. So I do need you to bear with me, right? And keep focused. If you don't have the attention span right now, thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Hit like, maybe share. And honestly, I won't judge you if you bow out gracefully. But I also want to be honest about the limits of what anyone outside the state can prove, right? Even with strong reporting, data and official documentation, some of the most important financial details are obscured. Defence procurement schedules, intelligence sharing agreements, contractual clauses, it smells nice, and classified expenditures don't always show up in press releases. So what follows sticks to what can be supported by the public data sources, and where information is unavailable, I will make sure that I tell you and keep it transparent, right? So to the people in northern Nigeria, those living with displacement, daily insecurity and ongoing threat, listen, I really want to acknowledge that conversations about money, minerals and geopolitical strategy can feel really distant from whatever your lived experience and reality is, right? When your family is under threat, talk of fiscal policy can sound a bit dismissive and insensitive, and that reaction is really valid. But avoiding economic and political analysis will not shield lives in the long term. Security is not just soldiers and strikes, it's shaped by resource allocation, diplomacy and long game planning. So let's talk about this not to reduce human life to numbers, but to understand what's really happening and who's paying. So let's look at what exactly happened. On Christmas Day 2025, the US launched airstrikes inside Nigeria, targeting what it described as, I'm trying to think how I say this without getting flagged, ISIS-linked militant camps in Sokoto State. Nigeria's government said it was briefed in advance and gave its approval, is what they said anyway. Officials later said that the targeted sites were tied to foreign extremist elements with local collaborators. No civilian casualties were reported, although debris was said to have been found as far as Kwara State. The reason this isn't just another headline is because a foreign power striking on Nigerian soil with official blessing on a major holiday carries huge political weight. It raised immediate questions about sovereignty, precedent, and how the story was being framed. We have to understand that language is policy and framing it is absolutely everything. The US described the targets as ISIS linked, but that term, whilst potentially accurate in part, risks oversimplifying the complexity of Nigeria's security situation. So banditry in the northwest, jihadist insurgency in the northeast, local political militias and organised criminal networks all exist in overlapping and sometimes cooperating systems. To label them all under one foreign extremist umbrella erases the nuance that policymakers must navigate. So DT's religious framing of the conflict, positioning it as a Christian defence, only adds to the potential for long-term division and deepens mistrust in northern communities where Muslims are the majority but are also suffering. The Nigerian government responded to this framing by reasserting that terrorism in Nigeria affects all, Muslims and Christians alike. Even analytically, ISIS linked as a term may oversimplify Nigeria's security challenges in the north, which include multiple actors, Boko Haram, ISWAP, bandits, kidnappers, and various localized militias. The boundaries between ideology and organized crime are really blurred. Financing, recruitment, logistics, and local protection networks all matter. The danger in letting imported terms define Nigeria's realities is that they can distort policy and lead to missteps in both diplomacy and defence. And I hope that gives you a bigger picture there, right? So in order to find out why now, I think it's important that we zoom out to the Sahel. This strike happened in a shifting regional context. In early 2025, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger formally withdrew from ECOWAS, deepening their own alliance as part of a sovereignty reset and openly distancing themselves from Western military presence. Niger expelled US troops from a key drone base in Agadez. France has withdrawn military operations. The Sahel is no longer seen by itself as a playground for foreign counter-terrorism missions. In contrast, however, Nigeria allowing US strikes was immediately seen as a deviation. Worse, tensions had already been rising, with a Nigerian military plane making an emergency landing in Burkina Faso just days earlier, triggering airspace violation accusations, right? So this wasn't just a counter-terrorism action, it was geopolitical positioning. The strike reasserted the US access to the region, using Nigeria as a platform, just as neighbouring states were shutting their doors. So Nigeria may see this as pragmatism, but the cost of pragmatism is rarely cheap. Pragmatism. If the threat was real, why didn't Nigeria strike alone? The likely question is a capability gap. US resources say MQ-9 Reaper drones were used and launched from maritime platforms, deploying precision-guided munitions. This is not just about having aircraft, it's about surveillance integration, target intelligence, munition logistics, and operational infrastructure. And that brings us straight to the big question, right? How much is this costing Nigeria? So let's talk numbers. Nigeria is trying to rebuild its fiscal base. In 2025, President Tinubu passed tax reform bills aimed at expanding revenue and reducing dependency on oil exports. The proposed 2026 budget stands at 58.18 trillion naira, right? With a deficit of over 4% of GDP. Debt servicing alone is projected at 15.52 trillion naira, with inflation cooling, but pressure on households is still really high. There's only so much fiscal room to maneuver. This is why this matters, right? When your economy is constrained, where you choose to spend becomes political. Should funds go to high-end security tech or stabilising basic services? Should taxes fund drone intelligence or food distribution? The human cost sits underneath all of this, right? The World Food Programme reports that hunger and food insecurity in the region are worsening. Many ministries reportedly still haven't received their 2025-26 budget allocations and are operating on rolled over budgets from last year. Behind the scenes, some suspect that the president may have delayed allocations deliberately to redirect funds to security priorities. If true, it's either a sign of strategic foresight or maybe political calculus. Either way, it's a shift with what I'd call real consequences. And here's where it gets layered, because Nigeria is also spending on its own security infrastructure. The government is engaged in a major defence procurement programme. I can never say procurement, including a $997 million request for US-made AH-1Z Viper helicopters, training and integration with international humanitarian targeting protocols. But these systems are long-term investments. They come with contractor support, spare parts maintenance, and high operational costs, and they don't deliver instant wins. So even now, a large chunk of Nigeria's 2025 defence budget, which is, I think, over 6.5 trillion naira, goes to personnel and admin costs. Every naira spent here is one less for food security, health and education. So while the missiles themselves weren't cheap, the bigger cost is what they signal, that Nigeria may not yet have full sovereign capability. That raises questions of control, leverage and bargaining power in future negotiations. So that brings us to the other question. What's Nigeria standing on? Oil and minerals, but not just those. As of 2024, Nigeria had an estimated 37.5 billion barrels of proven crude oil reserves, placing it amongst Africa's top producers, though Libya often ranks the highest. But the economic story doesn't end there, because Nigeria also has significant deposits of solid minerals and rare earths, including northern states where they have lithium, gold, copper, iron ore and tantalite. So I hope you're still following, right? Sokoto is better known for limestone, gypsum and agrarian trade routes, not oil, right? Which is exactly why insecurity there is such a threat. When agriculture collapses due to violence, food inflation rises, supply chains break, markets freeze and fiscal stress deepens. This isn't just a humanitarian crisis, it's an economic one. And let's not forget farmland, okay? Pay attention. Unstable farmland isn't just a tragedy for those who live off of it. It can also be a strategic opportunity for foreign agricultural interests. Pay attention. Prolonged agricultural decline can create openings that benefit big players in global food systems. Can you hear me, yeah? And some observers quietly note that where profit flows, where food insecurity becomes entrenched. I hope you're following and reading between the lines here, right? So what does President Tinubu stand to lose or gain, right? He's already been endorsed for re-election in 2027. That means every single major decision now is being judged through that lens. If security improves and the North becomes governable again, he can claim that his tough reforms were strategic. He can point to restored confidence, rising investment, and unification against extremism. But, guys, if violence persists or worsens, the complete opposite happens. He risks losing the northern vote. He risks being seen as too close to the West, and the opposition will unify behind the perception of that failure. Worse still, religious leaders, many of whom command loyalty in the North, have for years had their power and structures left intact because, well, the bottom line is that they deliver votes, right? Moving too forcefully now, especially if it's seen as foreign aligned, risks alienating these very blocks. The political price could be enormous, which brings us to the accountability gap, right? And this one's a big one, right? Nigerians have long expressed outrage at the way certain individuals, including scholars, are seen to openly defend or rationalize banditry. Sheikh Ahmad Gumi, for instance, has long advocated engagement with armed actors. While some see this as peace building, we also need to consider that it risks giving moral cover to fighters who target civilians. When warlords get turbaned or mainstreamed, as in the case of Aleru in Zamfara, it sends a message, right? Some violence is negotiable. That moral ambiguity is immensely costly, arguably one of the most dangerous and destabilizing costs of all. So, is Nigeria protecting its sovereignty or risking it? And here's where the big picture starts to show, right? The Sahel bloc is seen by many of us as bold, turning away from the West entirely, cutting ties and leaning into new partnerships. And in contrast, when you look at Nigeria's moves may look hesitant or confused, but another reading is possible. Maybe this isn't indecision. Maybe, hopefully, it's strategic hedging. Maybe Nigeria is trying to avoid being pinned into any one power block. Maybe it's refusing to swap one dependency for another. If that's true, honestly, I pray. Then diversification through tax reform, reduced oil reliance, new partnerships, including with Turkey and China, and stronger local capacity becomes a form of protection, a safeguard, a bet on sovereignty in the long game. And maybe, just maybe, and again, I'm wishful thinking here, right? The delayed ministry budgets, early repayment to the IMF, aggressive reform bills, and fiscal belt tightening signal that maybe the president saw what was coming and tried to prepare. If so, it would mark one of the boldest, most underappreciated strategic plays in recent Nigerian governments. So, what's the real cost of the Christmas strike? It's narrative control. It's regional leadership, it's domestic trust, it's long-term fiscal sustainability, it's the risk of becoming dependent once again on foreign protection. It's the price of silence in the face of moral ambiguity, and it's the lives and the futures of Nigerians who feel unseen and have done for a long time. Human life is not a budget line, but policy is made with budgets, and silence always comes at a cost. So I guess when we zoom out to the bigger picture, right, the bigger question is this: will President Tinubu's risk versus reward strategy actually pay off, both politically, economically, and socially, in fact, right? Or will the cost prove greater than anyone could possibly anticipate? I guess we can only wait and see. What are your thoughts? Let's talk.